Everybody, welcome to Because Cannabis from Wayward Media every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube. That's where you can find us. Give us a little subscription. Click that button. Click it. Click that button for me, please. Click that button. Wayward.media. Wayward Media brings you brand new shows every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. and Thursdays on Spotify. My name is BC Wayman. That's Dustin Kava, as always. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing awesome, man. How are you?
I am well. I'm excited. I'm excited about the show today that we're getting ready to talk to our guest here in just a few moments. We've had some great guests. Let's give a shout out to Zoe Wilder. You can find her on Instagram and on LinkedIn, on Twitter. We'll put her link below. Been wonderful hooking us up with some amazing people to be able to speak with. Don't forget to check out the show, wayward.media. We got some new shows coming to the platform. Plant Saved My Life, hosted by Raven Areola. Maybe our guest today will be on that show eventually. Raven takes a deep dive, talking to everyone from patients to shamans, anyone who's dealing with herbal medicines. Raven takes an educated scientific look at how a variety of plants from the ground can help change our human lives. We're excited today to have a show that's kind of go talk like that. I feel like I have my serious voice on, Dustin. Do I have my serious voice on? I very much feel like my serious voice.
It does. It does feel like a serious voice.
I have a serious subject today. Dustin Kava, excited to bring our a guest on here in just a few moments. Do you find yourself, Dustin, you're a workaholic. You're someone who's very busy. You're someone who every time I try to get in touch with you, you talk about your 1,000 hours that you're putting into this, there, and that. Do you ever take a moment? Like, do you meditate? Do you do yoga? To take a moment to calm down that overactive, overly hirsute head of yours?
No, not as much as I should. I know that's probably my biggest downfall is no, I do not. I am always in work mode. Always. I can't stop.
I think it has to be as we mature, as I've gotten older. I'm going to be 50 here shortly. And as I have gotten older, I have found myself struggling to find that time to relax and sit back and let myself recharge, to rest, right? As much as I should. I feel like I'm better with my exercise. I exercise more than I've ever done. I yoga, I run haphazardly, I admit. But I still, even when I was away, even when I was just recently away with my families in a cavern, the Appalachian Mountains, I was working. I ended up on the computer and working. And I think as human beings, what I have determined as I've gotten older is as a human being, I need time to connect, right? I need time to connect. I need time to relax. I haven't got quite to the walking around barefoot in the grass. I have sensitive feet, right? I worn shoes too long. I'm very humanized in city eyes. I can't help. I'm sorry. My wife goes, I can't walk bare feet on anything. Is that weird of me? Like, it's my sensitive toes, man. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, man, that's pretty weird.
All right. You know who? I'm sure our guest today, that's a wonderful, warming rendition. Dustin, will you help me bring in our guest today as we get ready to from Because Cannabis every Wednesday at 4:20 p.m. We're very, very excited to have two folks on today to talk about maybe finding a moment to relax, maybe finding a moment to reconnect, going somewhere else and stepping away and finding that way to continue using herbal medicines, continuing to find ways that the earth, as it's intended, can help you just feel better, right? In very certain ways. And so with that, we have Steve DeAngelo, we have Firstman, Life as a Ceremony Retreats. You can learn more about them, and we'll definitely have the links below at their websites. It's rastavillage.com. You can also find it RIV Retreats on Instagram as well. And we'll put Steve's links in the comments below. We got two gentlemen here to talk about taking a moment. Steve, Firstman, we'll start with Firstman. How are you doing today, sir?
Taking a moment to speak to you, you know.
I appreciate you taking that moment.
When we think about
it really means a lot.
I remember, yeah, man. Blessings to all your listeners. You know, who's out there in the internet world or wherever they are reaching to you from. We're sending their one love spirit of Rastafari, you know, to encompass us. There is never a time that we need these things most, you know. The world is really coming from zero since 2020, you know, and as a result of this, it's really everybody's consciousness. Everyone is an expert at the moment, and everybody is wanting to do something, and everybody think they can do something, and they should. That's true sovereignty. That's true self-determination. So we really want to see how best we can be harmonious. And it's a pleasure for anyone, especially speaking about things like cannabis, which is a very harmonious plant within the Rastafari community. It's nice to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. And then, of course, Steve DeAngelo, speaking of the cannabis plant and the harmoniousness of it, you've been talking that game for a long time, Steve. I still just recently, I was watching a video of you from right around like 16 or 17 talking about cannabis, California's legal efforts. You've come a long way in this industry and now have found a way to partner up with Life as a Ceremony. Has it been harmonious for you in the last few decades, sir?
Well, the plant is always harmonious to me. It's my place of peace, right? But the battle has been vigorous, right? In the last 20 years, I went up against the federal government in a very serious way, and we ultimately managed to mostly win. But it was a very demanding struggle. So, we are fortunate that we've been gifted these plant medicines that keep us centered, that keep us in touch with our souls, that keep us in a place of balance as we work to restore balance and peace to a world that's not peaceful or balanced right now.
What does it feel like to then be communicating with people who are out of balance? It's all, everybody around me is in that hustle and bustle right now, and so even just the initial conversations with them, it's all go. So how do you even slow them down just right up the riff to just take a moment and respond, or take a moment and learn, or how do you get anybody to slow down?
Well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
No, go first.
Well, this is why we could just jump straight into life being the ceremony, because if you start to think about it in that kind of a way, the way how we were trained to see spirituality, it's almost like a moment that you take out. In the colonial world, you go to church at a particular time, and that's when you're given, that idea of slowing down, But also in the very same Christian world, they ask you to think of your body as a temple. And those are some of the things that Rastafari has pulled from that this is your temple, and your temple requires a level of reverence, in terms of how you treat it. So we eat a particular way because this is our temple. We have the Holy Sacrament, ganja, because this is our temple. It's like our incense that keeps our inside mentally and physically, flowing good. So life is a ceremony for us is one of the ways how you wouldn't have to decide to slow down or speed up. It's more that you have become, in your every interaction, in your every moment, you don't have to say, okay, I'm going to do something and then I need to integrate. Your life is an entire integration in every single interaction that you have. So that's the aim or the mission of life is a ceremony. How could you live in the mission of reverence?
It's interesting in having been, there's seems to be several kind of different retreats out there these days. And we've heard some really great things about life as a ceremony. So, maybe from each of you, we go Steve first and then the first man. What do you think really separates or sets apart the life as a ceremony retreat, the life as a ceremony experience from other, psychedelic retreats? It's becoming a big thing. I know you guys were just at MAPS recently. You got NFL quarterbacks out there promoting ayahuasca. So you got more people that are going to be opportunistic, taking advantage of this incoming kind of psychedelic retreat world. why life is a ceremony, what makes it the one that allows you to connect, the one that allows you to become, versus some of the other Johnny come latelys that are assuredly going to come soon?
Well, the short answer is that life as a ceremony offers our participants an opportunity to engage with real, true, authentic Jamaican Rastafari culture, and that's pretty much unique amongst the retreats that you find in Jamaica. Most of the retreats in Jamaica are hosted at resorts. They feature facilitators that are flown in from out of the country. They often have psychologists and folks like that who are doing a lot of wellness therapy oriented kind of work. And the connection with the island is and the culture of the island is not very great. But at the Life as a Ceremony retreats, you're not going to a resort. You're going to an actual real village that has elders, that has children, that has families, that has workshops, that grows its food. And this is a community that already lives by the lessons that the plants teach us. So just by being in the village and being a part of the Rastafari way of life is this incredible, almost psychedelic experience in itself. Even if you didn't take the medicine, it's such a reworking, it's such an immersion in a very different kind of environment, going from Babylon system that runs by Babylon rules to living for 5 days in a Rastafari community that already lives by the lessons that the plants teach us.
Well, I would love, Firstman, can you actually give me a little background on the Rastafari Indigenous Village? And just kind of, give me an understanding of just, where you guys have been located and for how long, and did you guys have to, kind of move amongst the island to actually be able to start this? Was it, or have you always been able to be there? Just any of that background info.
Yeah. Rastafari on a whole emerged out of Jamaica as a balancing towards the colonial imposition of Europe. And as a result of that, Africans were predominantly the enslaved people. Rastafari is almost like the balance to that mental disorder that the human family found themselves in the 16th century. And Rastafari then communicated, to the world what we call one love. And one love, people just think it's about let's forget everything and get together and it will be all right. But no, one love is actually a reparatory step. It's a step to reconnect people to their story. It's a step to prevent the destruction of the planet. And this is why, as Rastafari Indigenous Village, there is this big issue where African people are not connected to their land, and they're not being asked to or recognized neither by the indigenous communities or by governments of the world as indigenous, because everybody wants the resources of Africa. So Rastafari Indigenous Village, landless. It's a community that is faced with extinction. And because we are faced with extinction, we recognize that the only way without guns or bombs that we could actually save or put an attempt to save our community from extinction, we work with the 3 Ps. We must first preserve this community. We must then protect what we preserve, and then we must promote it. And that's why we, people like Bob Marley have been doing that great job, even in death, of still promoting the Rastafari philosophy in a very unique way. So Rasta Village has joined that call as an authentic space where you hear from the lion its own story and the lioness and the Cubs, yes, about our own story. And we are not trying to be caught up in division or in any kind of separation to say this space is better than another space, because the entire world is in a problem. And any person who is interacting with the plants, we are convinced that the plant is interacting with them. They are being used by these intelligent entities, be it corporate companies, be it indigenous communities. And what we are doing here as Rastafari Indigenous Village is try to ensure that that mycelium is loaded with love and given
Yeah.
both people who have never experienced these plants before, along with people who are custodians of these plants, to be in a space where we can talk about our differences and work on the things that are similar to us, and to see how we can evolve in harmony. That's the essence of what we're really doing here, you know. So I really give honor to any person who is trying, whether industrially or otherwise, because I really don't think they're the ones doing it. I really think it's the plant. The plants are forging their way, and all of these people are tools, including ourselves. But are we deliberate tools? Are we conscious tools? And I think if there's any separation, that might be the separation. That as Rastafari Indigenous, as life is a ceremony, we're making ourselves willing tools to be used by the plant to carry out this mandate. So we have been here for 15 years on this property that we don't own and would love to own. We have been bringing in visitors to become friends and family of a better way. Rastafari is not a religion for us. Rastafari is a relation. And this relation is what we can have with all living things. So it's about opening up ourselves to know the difference and to be respectful of people as they be respectful of us in our homes, and learn from each other.
How did you, Steve? Obviously, just listening to you talk first, man, it's a bit emotional. Listening to you talk, like I can see why, you know, if I'm there, if I'm on site, the power, like I can just feel it resonating through the airwaves right now. Steve, how did you connect with Rasta Village? How did you connect with Life as a Ceremony? You can learn more of this right away, rastavillage.com/retreats. We'll put our link below. How did you connect up with this community, Steve?
Well, in 2018, my home state of California legalized cannabis, and you know that's been my goal for my entire life. And we managed to defeat the federal government along the way. And so I decided it was time to take a tour and go around the world, which I hadn't been able to really travel for the past dozen years, and see what the spark that we'd lit in California had spread to around the world. So change their cannabis laws in 4 different continents. And in the course of this tour, I came to a Rastafari Indigenous Village. And it was just an incredible experience for me. You can feel it already through the airwaves. By the time I was halfway through the village, tears were running.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I finally was in a community that lived by the values that I had been struggling for my whole life. It was a glimpse at the kind of future that we hope to build. It was so beautiful to see the children in the village with their dreadlocks, playing in the garden with the ganja plants growing, drumming, with this beautiful food being made from the trees that grow right there in the village. It was a picture of the world that we hope to create.
In keeping up with, you know, this ongoing conversation that we as a human family have a relationship with this planet, what, I mean, I once read or once saw a documentary once that talked about water and its relationship with you and what certain sounds can actually manipulate water, essentially. And it was this idea that, you know, if you looked at it under a microscope and you looked at the molecules of it, something that was played classical would have a perfect, almost snowflake-like geometric shape to it. Something that had, you know, heavy metal or loud thrashing ended up looking broken and jagged. And when I think about how much of our body is in water and being in a place that is consistently surrounded by good conversation in terms of the relationship with the plant and the environment, it's that whole, as you live in that, you are resonating that. And I can only imagine what it's like to walk through an environment that has been resonating with that love and that understanding for decades upon decades. And how do you bridge that gap? To me, there's this ongoing, people just, gosh, it seems, yeah, right. It seems like it would be a profound experience to be there, but it's important to invigorate this conversation when someone isn't necessarily able to be there physically. A lot of the education and what you represent is, it could take someone 5 years from hearing you talk to finally be able to afford or to get themselves to be there physically with you. And so how do you continue that ongoing conversation? How do you help convey that education when you are from afar?
Well, first of all, it's not that expensive. Our retreats are the least expensive on the market. They're $1,500. You can get an airplane ticket to Jamaica for $500. So that's a chunk of money, but it's something that's within reach for a lot of folks. So you know, a lot of retreats are geared towards the idea that a person is wounded, that a person is suffering from trauma. They're going to come to a retreat. They're going to engage in experience. They're going to heal out of that experience. And then they're going to go back into the life and be reintegrated into the life that they came from. And they'll fit into that life more smoothly. That is not our philosophy. We seek to bring our retreat guests into an experience. And part of that experience is understanding the need to take the lessons that are learned during the experience and make them real and make them living at home. We don't want to reintegrate folks into the lives that wounded them and wounded all of us more smoothly. We want to empower them and inspire them to become change agents, to change the societies that they came from, so that we all stop being wounded.
You help?
I think the main thing. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to have to, in following up to Steve's question, and really for you, Firstman, or either one of you, kind of then walk us through or walk me through what that experience is like. Like, what can we expect? What kind of, what is our day like? What is some of this amazing food? I feel like I can almost smell it right now. I'm curious what our day-to-day kind of interactions are like.
Well, as I say, you know, just to go a little bit back to the preparation, because you're coming into a preparation space. And the first thing about this space is that there is no hierarchy in our mentality. Okay, it's Rastafari function as a horizontal society, which means that everyone on the planet is a gift, and your experiences, be it traumatic or otherwise, is a tool for evolving the human experience. So when you come into our space, you're not being thought about as someone who is sick. You're thought about as someone with unique experiences that is needed right now for us to evolve this colonial imposition that we have all found ourselves in. So once you enter into a space like that, we normally try to embrace what has been lost. To every nation on the planet, every ethnic group, drums are important. So there's always drumming, yes? The preparation for life is a ceremony, and the preparation for any kind of a ceremony is really what you should be doing for preparing life, yes? So as a result of that, we know what is happening to the climate right now, you know, as it relates to meat eating and so on. You know, that the meat industry is considered to be one of the major industries that is causing the ozone layer to disappear and the climate changes that we're having. So you're taking responsibility immediately, a personal responsibility, to ensure that even for 5 days, you're reducing those issues, right? So this is where you come into collective responsibility. So once we open that space with drums and we open that space with identifying who you are and what you bring in your bags, the experiences that you bring to share, to assist us to evolve, then that space is open up so we all feel comfortable with each other. Then after that, we wait, you know, that's the introductory day. Then we go into having a dinner. Then the next day we are really going down to the river. And all of our connections is that humanity has been, we have lost offerings. We are not giving offerings anymore to ourselves. We're not giving offerings to all the other entities that close this loop of our existence. So we go to the river and we give offerings, recognizing that we are 70% water, and so is the planet that we're on. And without water, we cannot exist, you know? So we go and we give these offerings, and we continue these offerings in every moment of ourselves, offering to the trees, offerings to the water, and then we move into ceremony. Yes, and then when we move into ceremony that night, it's about, ceremonies are not about fixing anything. Ceremonies are about expanding everything. It's about not saying to someone that you need to change. It's about saying that you need to grow. And that all that you have experienced before are so important, you don't need to get rid of them. They'll become good information of how not to do it again. You know what I mean? Then the next day we continue with the offerings, and we will probably take someone to the ocean or to different excursions in Jamaica if they want, depending, anything that matches. No alcohol, you know, not any kind of an alcoholic space or anything like that. And we keep ourselves in that idea of purity and reverence. And then the next night, which would be almost, now we should be at Thursday, we're going to do another ceremony that will allow us to deepen these conversations that we're having with ourselves and the plant. And then on Thursday, we work with integration. And then we say goodbye on Friday. But our goodbyes are not goodbyes of not seeing you again, you know. All of the people who come to Life is a Ceremony, we still continue to communicate. We go to different places. Just the other day, I was in New York with people who came to Life is a Ceremony because we went to go and experience something with the Dogans up in New York. And we are just it's an opportunity for us to learn about the planet together. You know, that's the main thing.
I know that both of you, I believe, recently traveled to Denver for the MAPS kind of conference. And it seems like it's both an interesting adjacent world to what you're doing, but also almost different. And I'm not part of it. What was that experience like for, I guess, both of you as you're working to really build a use of, you know, cannabis, a use of plants, a use of different psychedelics to really connect with oneself, to go into the very academic research world of which you're both familiar with? But how was that balance? What was that experience like, being surrounded by, from the celebrities to the researchers and beyond, all in this burgeoning like psychedelic world?
First,
Maps was very interesting. You know, one thing it showed me is that there is no hierarchy. Everyone have issues. We have a lot to figure out. So there was nobody there that could say that we are the standard, you know. There are criticisms to everyone, which makes it a level playing field.
Yeah.
And it was good to know each other. You know, it was really good to know each other. The indigenous people were there, you know, and of course, you know, they have their concerns as it relates to how their methods are being subdivided and and they're not being recognized for it. However, they had a platform to share how they felt about it. It wasn't a place to answer questions.
Yeah, it was exactly.
You
It's to
know,
hear the questions.
it was a place that actually creates
Yes.
questions, you know, and it was a place that opened up a lot of awareness that this particular community has the potential to transform the planet, and that the mistakes that were made in industrialization should not necessarily be made again, you know. There were many layers of conversation that were happening at MAPS, and it all depends on you. Why was your, you know, what's your mission? Because that's going to decide what you see, you know. And for myself, I certainly saw that this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for the most conscious group of people. It was like the United Nations of consciousness. You know what I mean? It's like the most conscious group of people on the planet now can see that we have a responsibility to recognize each other. Yeah. And an opportunity to, I mean, the foundation of globalization has been built on colonialism and imposition. And here now we are, this day is the oldest day on the planet, and we are alive. I mean, can you imagine that? That we are in the oldest moment on the planet right now.
Yes.
Having a conversation about how we can do it. And in a time when the planet can have a meeting of how we occupy the planet together, while the plants that have been destroyed by the colonial powers, you know, from the witches in Germany, all over the world, they did everything to silence the voice of these entities. And now they are back.
They are back.
It's an important opportunity.
It feels good.
We saw that at MAPS. If that's what we're looking for, that's there. But it's just going to be the power of perception.
How about for you, Steve? What was your experience like there? You know, not only being there, but representing life as a ceremony as well.
Well, MAPS was just this incredibly big tent. And I think that what it spoke to me was the vast numbers of different kinds of people who are responding to the call that the plants are sending out. You just had all sorts of, you had folks from indigenous communities. You had folks who were underground facilitators. You had folks who were raising money for big publicly traded companies. You had scientists. You had old hippies. You had people who were interested in mythology. You had people who were interested in the data. And it really just it drove home to me the massive nature of what's happening now. You know, when we look at the world today, the number of people who have had experiences with the sacred plants is massive. It's more people than we've ever seen before. If you talk to the United Nations, they say something like 300 million people around the world regularly consume cannabis. If you look at public opinion polls and research in the United States, you find out something like 20% of the population has found their way to psychedelic experiences. If you extrapolate that to the rest of the world, those of us who have a relationship with the sacred plants, collectively, we are as large as the largest nations on this planet. And we have a shared value system that bridges all of the differences that usually divide the human family. I can sit with people and have sat with people of many different religions, races, economic status, educational levels, and because all of us had the same relationships with plants, we had developed a shared value system, right? So no matter where we are, we value creativity over conformity. We value individual freedom over state or corporate authority. We value nature over industry. We value inclusion over judgment or discrimination. We value peace over war, and we value love over hate. And those are the values that these hundreds of millions of people have all across the world. We are really one tribe. And so asking ourselves, what do we do with this? It's now time for us to meet each other, to recognize each other, and figure out the mission that we're being called to.
Firstman, I have a question. Sorry, Dustin, I wanted to apologize to interrupt. I'm curious in something.
Sorry, BC, it's raining so heavily here, man.
Oh no,
Man,
hard to
listen,
hear.
we did some drumming yesterday for the rain, and then we remember we are having ceremonies this
You have
weekend,
positive results.
and we couldn't turn it off. You know, it's flooding
You
out
can't
right
always
now.
stop it. I'm curious, and Steve can help answer this as well. But how basically, with Rasta Village and with RIV, how you came about kind of the psychedelic world when cannabis and ganja, it's so well known in that area. How did the Life as a Ceremony? I don't think Firstman can hear us right now, and maybe Steve can help out. How did they get into this world of psychedelics? How did that get on the radar and then start to transition the culture of not just cannabis, but other herbal medicines?
I don't know if I would love to call it a transition. I would want to just call it a natural evolution. Rastafari, this particular group of Rastafari have about 3 main groups: the Nyabingi, the Baba Shanti, and the 12 tribe of Israel. But because Rastafari, one of the main principles of Rastafari is that no one can speak for Rastafari, you only speak as Rastafari. Our group, the village, is called Rastafari Indigenous Village because we recognize that the indigenous people of the world, it was almost like we wanted to create a repository, a space where we could reconnect. So that middle word indigenous was there particularly for that. Lo and behold, someone from Brazil wanted a space to have a ceremony. And where do they think was best to do this? Rastafari Indigenous Village, So when they came over, I didn't even know the word. I spent so long even now I don't think I can spell ayahuasca that good. I didn't know what
It's a tough word.
I know nothing about this plant or what it means or whatever. I just know they wanted a space to host, and we are offering them a space. And this particular shaman, his name is Leo Artes. This man loves cannabis. He loves cannabis so much, And we shared as much cannabis as we could with it. And then he said, "But you have to share my sacred medicine." No. Rastafari don't do that, We don't know what we're drinking, what we're having. And he said, "Well, but this does not feel right, Firstman. I just shared yours and you're not willing to share mine. Trust me, this will be good." And listen, the entire village drank that medicine. And, we were very conscious of the world that we're in. Now we just became the world that we're in. We literally could feel that we are a part of this planet and we are one with it. We were able to, speaking for myself personally, man, when I touch the grass and I recognize that it is equally, I felt this beat in the grass. I was like, it has a heart. It was frightening, to feel the vibration of the earth. We as Rastafari, we know this. We know this, and this is why we are always so one love and defend it. But for myself personally, I heard of I have another friend, is a very good friend of mine, Rastafari, and he was telling me about this experience of vibrating with the earth that he had with cannabis. I have never had that with ganja, right? But it's only after experiencing it with ayahuasca I recognize what he's talking about. It's not very often you get that with ganja. I've had it afterwards, because after getting to that place, for myself personally, when I recognized that I was able now to connect with all things, for me to do that again, it's much easier. All I need to do is to go into the environment where the crickets are singing and where the frogs are singing and where the wind is blowing and the sky is beautiful and the moon is shining. And I can almost recreate that experience and that vibration again, not necessarily in the same depth, but that gate.
No, but now that you felt it, that feeling is in your DNA. It's resonant, you can never unfeel it again. It's very hard, Yes, you may go back to some of the you may go back to life as it was before, but you still are walking through life knowing it was you have it's a shock. It's in you.
That was real. That was real. And that what life before is may not have been real. You know what I mean? And so this started to take me through everything. To San Pedro, to Peyote, working my way to Africa. Until this year, I got to Africa through Iboga, and so yeah, the Rastafari Indigenous Village now just become this repository of space that can lead us to our own story, to our own story. We love mushrooms because it connects to every human being. It's a fungus. It's all over the planet. No one can own it. One can develop unique traditions with it, but this one belongs to everyone. But I was able to find my path into Africa through the Rastafari Indigenous Village experience of opening our space to ourselves and to our own people, the indigenous community. I hope that answered your question, Wayman. Is that what you were asking?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's just so interesting along those lines. Steve, I'm curious, you are someone who, you were on the forefront of cannabis legalization. I mean, you were preaching that drum, banging that drum before it was popular. You paid a lot of the prices. There's a lot of great documentation on what you went through. Psychedelics, it feels like a buzzword. It feels like it's sitting at that new precipice. But I know when I talk to people, they say it's very different from the early days of legal cannabisation. As someone who's been in the forefront of it well before Dustin and I, what lessons can we learn? What should psychedelics avoid? Like, what do you want to see different? Maybe nothing. Like, what did you learn from cannabis that are interesting when it comes to, as we push forward, as cities start to decriminalize it, we're going to start to get there. What should they do to avoid the mistakes, or what kind of path should psychedelics as a whole take?
Well, what we learned with cannabis is that there's this very critical stage that you arrive at in a movement when you really start achieving enough popular support that you can make massive, large political changes. When you do that, when you start making those changes effectively, then you reduce the risk of being associated with these substances, and a whole new sector of people comes into the community. And so what we saw with cannabis was that that in the first 3 or 4 decades before we actually started winning elections and reducing the risk, almost everybody in the movement was someone who had a personal relationship with the plant, who was dedicated to the plant and was engaging from that kind of place. As we started changing the laws and creating the possibility of a legal cannabis industry, we started seeing people coming in who were more interested in the industry part than they were in the cannabis part. Folks who were more attracted by the economic opportunities that legalization was offering. And that wasn't a bad thing necessarily, because it brought a lot more people into the movement. It brought a lot of resources into the movement. I think it's one of the reasons that the cannabis movement saw a lot of successes. But it also created a lot of problems. And so, you know, in my home state of California now, most of the people who had a personal relationship with the plant, who were the earliest pioneers of the movement, are no longer in the industry. It's no longer possible for them to make a living. Many of them have even left the state. And the folks who are running the industry don't run it in the same way that people who have a personal relationship with the plant do. You know, one of the very first things that happened in my company, Harborside, when we got taken over by corporate forces, was they came to me and they wanted me to fire 7 out of the 8 women who were in the executive suite, right? Which I, of course, refused to do, and was promptly sidelined from leadership in the company. And if you take a look at the structure of corporate boards in California, you find that Harborside was not the only place that happened.
Yeah, right.
The diversity of the boards of cannabis companies in California went down after legalization, not up, in exactly the wrong direction. So this is what we need to be afraid of with psychedelics, right? Is that as we become more and more successful, the folks are attracted to the movement who are really more interested in the financial power that they can acquire than they are in advancing the lessons that these plants teach us. And we just need to be very clear about what's most important to us as we move through this period of time. Stay true to those values.
It seems like there is, and this is for you, Steve. It definitely seems like the verbiage and the advertising used along with psychedelics in the country is overwhelmingly positive, whereas, you know, in the cannabis industry, I heard, you know, you had reefer madness in a total different way than what I'm hearing with psychedelics today. Every news article is positive. With cannabis in the country, they're still talking about child overdoses and, you know, chemicals being in it's so much negativity, but I don't hear any of that associated in the psychedelic discourse in the States. And so what drives all these larger entities, which clearly have a stake in presenting it not in such a positive way? It's just as hard for them to monetize or patent. It's just as hard for them to jump into the industry as cannabis was. Why are they not why are they, you know, stigmatizing it in a different way? Why is it so this is purely positive and none of the negativity talk?
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre from my point of view. You know, when I started working on legalizing cannabis 50 years ago, I figured that we'd get that job done in 5 years because the case was so simple. You just explain it and it would be legal, right? And then we would take on the more difficult job of convincing people to legalize substances that allow you to see things that aren't really present in front of you. We always thought that mushrooms would be much more difficult to get legal than cannabis, and that's turning out not to be true. Why? I think there's a number of reasons. One of them is that the cannabis legalization movement broke that ground and really showed that the war on drugs was a lie, and that especially plant-based substances that had been demonized actually could be really beneficial. So folks were with that original mindset was broken, and some openness and thinking was generated. I think that the science that's been coming out is very, very compelling too. You know, we have the Harvard studies, Johns Hopkins studies that just show really dramatic effects of cannabis on mental health, on alcoholism. I think that's a factor. But probably the most important factor is that, cannabis was made legal with a campaign of racial demonization. The cannabis plant came to American society through the hands of Black and brown people. And people like Harry Anslinger kicked off a campaign, not because they were so concerned about cannabis, but just because they wanted a tool to oppress Black and brown people. And so for decade after decade after decade, the American public was subjected to this campaign of misinformation. And in later years, it was a little bit more subtle when people like Ronald Reagan were doing it. But if you go back and you read the quotes of Harry Anslinger, I'm not going to repeat them here. Anybody wants to, just Google Harry Anslinger quotes, and you'll see that the man was using the most explicit kind of racial language that you can imagine. And that went on for decade after decade after decade. So I think there's a racial dynamic here that's unfortunate. But whatever the reason, it's so wonderful to see this progress happening so quickly relative to what we had to do with cannabis.
Firstman, one of the issues that happened a lot, especially in the US and maybe as a whole with cannabis legalization, is what Steve alluded to, those preconceived notions, those fears of what's going to happen. We still have that today. It's tapping into, for example, in the United States, the elderly market. It's becoming bigger and bigger, but there still is fear of people who haven't tried it. And I feel like maybe one of the biggest roadblocks or hurdles for someone trying an experience with an ayahuasca, an experience with a psilocybin or a DMT or any sort of other aspect like that is probably that fear of what they may feel. They may have some misconceptions. What are some things if someone is asking you or they're nervous about trying it, they want to come down, they want to experience life as a ceremony, they've been to rastavillage.com/retreats, they're all excited, but they're a little nervous. Do you have a prepared speech, or what do you offer them to tell them what this experience is like, or to offer them that assurance that I got your back, it's going to be okay, we have you here?
Well, I mean, I don't really try to convince people, to do this, because for most people it's a use, and for us it's an interaction. And that the language of industry are that these plans are almost like the religious imposition, where human beings feel as if they're hierarchy of the planet and everything is here for them to use and not interact with. So most of the time we really try to open people to, because everyone is wounded and they're having fears and so on and so forth. We try to allow people to expand, to try and come on a blind date, see the plants as another entity, but don't come with all your baggages. See a therapist first, go speak to a psychologist and sort out the human problem. What I mean? It's more the promotion that we try to and make your distance a shorter one, to know the power of the planet that you're on,
Mm-hmm.
And I think just the fact that we are caught up so much with the human issues, it doesn't give us the opportunity to really expand into these bigger realities that we are a part of. So I really try to allow people to see the bigger realities. The one that Steve just mentioned, though, as it relates to what cannabis is facing, I mean, just know Jamaica supplied New York and the United States for a long time. Planes were landing here on our highways and dropping back. And so there is that level of discrimination that we cannot ignore, that struggles, and that also brings the fear. And it was amazing at the psychedelic conference that MAPS put on, the amount of things I heard coming out of the Black community about things like harm reduction, because it was it's almost like the same discrimination that would come with something like AIDS. The same thing happened to the Black community with drugs. In the white community, it's almost promoted as, okay, it's not drug use, but drug abuse. In the Black community, if you touch anything at all, you're isolated by your family.
Yes.
You know, and it's mainly because there's so much that is already stuck up against you. You know, you're Black, you're poor, and then you start to take drugs. You know what I mean? It's almost like every mother feels this pain. But when you go over into the white communities, I'm not saying that the same thing don't exist, but you know, Steve was explaining to me that the idea of harm reduction came about because, you know, people were self-medicating themselves and they don't need to be locked out of society because they are, you know. And listen, these chemical drugs are so much stronger and can put you in so much more trouble than ayahuasca and all these other things. And trust me, a lot of your CEOs and judges and around the world are taking these drugs. You're okay with these earth medicines. If you have any fear about them, just tell yourself this. For thousands of years, people have been taking them without dying. You know, we put this in your head. You know, people have been taking these medicines and interacting with them. No death recorded. Yes. And all these other synthetic things that have been created, there is statistics about the death that they have caused. So be comfortable to meet yourself. Be comfortable to meet other entities. You know, just relax. Work with people who know what they're doing and have been doing it for a long time. And still sign a form to say that if you die, it's your own responsibility.
As we wrap up here, I would love to hear final words from both of you, really on anything. I had a couple other questions, but we're running short on time. But I just wanted to get you guys a chance to just say some thoughts.
I succumb to eldership. You go first, Steve.
Well, I think that we are at this really incredible time in the world today, where so many of us from so many different walks of life are engaging with the plants and are hearing the lessons that the plants are teaching us, and that we're now at a time of convening, a time when we need to sit with each other, when we need to understand what the plants are calling us to. We need to understand how to work with each other. We need to heal what other differences divide us. And then we need to rise to the mission that we're being called to. And it's just a magnificent time to be alive and to be part of this really incredible period of enlightenment in human thought and consciousness.
That's a tough act to follow, Firstman.
Yeah, I really think we need to analyze, you know, as the human family. I think we need to investigate where our implicit bias lies. I really think that we need to find a way how to have the conversation beyond industry. You know, we really need to look into why, you know, and you know, when this phrase "life is a ceremony" popped out, it's really just asking us to really look at every moment with integrity, to look at every moment in a space where we can make it beneficial and harmonious to whichever space we are in. It's a beautiful aim, it's a beautiful mission. It's not a goal. You know, it is something that we have to live with within our lifetime, because it is going to be beyond our lifetime. I am very sure, I'm not sure how we're going to fix this, but I recognize that what has been missing out of the major countries that are leading the value system of the world is eldership. You know, every young people feel as if they know. And we would want to rekindle some level of eldership amongst our world, you know, to ask the ancestors, ask the trees, ask the waters. They have been here much longer than us, you know, and to see how best we can create that narrative of respect. I certainly do not agree with everything that everyone has to say. And I'm very sure that everyone do not agree with everything I have to say. But through respect, you can visit my home, but do what I do. And I will visit your home and do what you do. It's a pleasure to be here with you, my brothers.
Oh, this episode was awesome. Steve, I didn't even know you were coming in, and I've been following you for years. So this was just like a little bit of a shock to me. And I just, this whole episode was awesome. Both of you, I cannot thank you enough for being here and talking with us.
I found it to be just a moment, and I think it's really important, especially, and it's a great closing thought, First Man, ending there. And we're talking with Firstman Steve DeAngelo, rastavillage.com/retreats. Life is a ceremony, RIV retreats at Instagram. It feels like I just meditated a bit. Like just listening to you, I start breathing slowly. And Steve, and you're talking about this connection, and just hearing the words, I'm in a more peaceful place, in a realization sometimes that it does get a bit too industrious. So this was one of my favorite conversations we've had in a long time. Steve DeAngelo, Firstman, Life is a Ceremony, rastavillage.com. Thank you both for joining us on the show. We really appreciate having you here. Thank you all for watching the show this week. It was an amazing opportunity. Speaking with Firstman, speaking with Steve DeAngelo. Thank you both. Visit him. Check him out. Rastavillage.com. Get to Jamaica. Connect. Visit his home. And enjoy yourselves. Connect. Thank you both for being here. Thank you guys for listening. Brand new shows every Wednesday, 4:20. Thursdays on Spotify and everywhere else you listen to audio podcasts. Bye, everybody.
Bye.